Welcome to this Alan Talks Tech video. If you'd like additional information on my technology videos, please visit my wiki at alantestwiki.pbworks.com. Now, before we take a look at how quality of service is implemented within a Wi-Fi network, let's take a look at basically how a Wi-Fi network typically operates. To avoid collisions within the network, a system called Carrier Sense Multiple Access Collision Avoidance, or CSMA-CA for short, is implemented. Within Wi-Fi circles, though, this is typically referred to as the Distributed Coordinated Function, or DCF for short. And basically, you're going to have to listen before you can talk. You have to be somewhat patient. So here in this example, we have a station transmitting to the access point. The access point is acknowledging the data packets. The other station can hear that the channel is occupied and basically holds off on transmission. When the transmission is completed, a random contention window timer starts to count down to 0. If the channel is still unoccupied, then that station can grab the channel and begin to transmit data. By using a random window, we avoid the possibility that multiple stations will all try to grab the channel simultaneously. Now, it is still possible that collisions will occur even using Carrier Sense multiple access collision avoidance techniques. The back-off timer, which we referred to, is technically known as the contention window. And the contention window timer has a range of values, for example, going from 7 to 1023. So if there is a collision, the station will need to double its back-off timer and try again. The station can keep doubling the value of the contention window timer, but it can't exceed the contention window maximum value. Once it's reached the maximum value, it'll just continue to retry. Each one of these values is typically multiplied by 20 microseconds to actually give you the time. So how does the contention window operate? Well, actually it's a little bit more complicated than just the contention window. We also have to take into account some other variables as well, such as the network allocation vector. The network allocation vector is transmitted when a station transmits data to indicate how long it's going to hold the channel for. So if we detect a network allocation vector while we're listening, we have to factor that into our back-off time. So this is how it would operate. Your contention window is going to start to count down, but if it sees a network allocation vector, it's going to halt the countdown process, wait for the network allocation vector timer to basically expire, and then resume the countdown. If during that period you see another NAV or network allocation vector, then you're going to have to hold off on the count and then resume once the NAV has expired. And this process will continue until you don't hear any more network allocation vectors and you can count down your contention window to 0. At this point, you can now finally transmit your data. Now let's take a closer look at how the distributed coordinated function operates. Here we've got a number of stations, station A, B, C, D, and E, all wishing to transmit data, and we're going to begin with station A, which is in the middle of transmitting a frame. So station A transmits the first frame. Station B has detected that the channel is busy, so it's holding off on the countdown. Basically, it's going to hold off until the timer, which was indicated in the network allocation vector, expires. It also has to take into account the distributed coordinated function interframe space. If you like, this is a safety window between successive frames to make sure that there's no interference and the channel is actually totally clear. So at this point, station B resumes a countdown after the diffs space. It counts down to 0 and transmits the frame. Now we jump to station D, because in this case, rather than just following in sequence to station C, station D actually had the shorter contention window countdown. So after holding off for its defined period of time, it's also able to transmit the frame. Now it's station's C opportunity to transmit the frame. Again, after waiting for the appropriate amount of time indicated in the network allocation vector, waiting for the DIFS timer to expire, the contention window resumes its countdown and the frame is successfully transmitted. We finish off basically with station E, which has been holding off in a deferred state, waiting for the other stations to complete their transmission. Okay, now let's take a look at how we can implement QoS, how we can prioritize different streams of data. Most access points today, most stations, are simply working with the distributed coordinated function, where there is actually no prioritization for different types of traffic. So everybody has to take their chances together. So there's basically one bucket where all the video, the voice, and the data are going to be streamed out from a particular station. If you implement 802.11e or the Wi-Fi Alliance's WMM, the Wi-Fi Multimedia, you can actually implement up to 4 different queues. The highest priority is going to be for voice. Voice has the highest priority because typically it's running a real-time application where latency is very critical as you're interacting with another person at the other end of the line. Video obviously also has to be a fairly high priority as well, but not quite as critical as voice in most applications, due to the fact that, for example, if you're watching YouTube, you can buffer it for a few seconds. Best effort, this could be web browsing traffic, for example, so an extra couple of 100 milliseconds. Most people won't notice it. Background traffic, that could be email, where again you can drop the prioritization a little bit lower, as if it takes an email an extra second or two to get across the network. Again, nobody's really going to notice. The access point is also involved in this mechanism by providing each one of the stations with a transmit opportunity for each one of their different quality of service buckets. A TXOP, or transmit opportunity, is a window of time granted by the access point to a particular stream. This means that the particular stream can grab the channel for a finite period of time defined by the TXOP. You can transmit as many frames or packets as you wish during that TXOP window. If you exceed the window, then you're going to have to fragment the packets and then basically wait your turn again before you can transmit the remainder. Another change which is going to have to be implemented is the arbitration interframe space, or AIFS. This is a piece of code basically operating within the station to help arbitrate between the different streams. For example, it's possible that the contention window for voice and the contention window for video both count down to 0 at the same time. So we would then have a virtual collision. However, there's one more mechanism that the system implements, which is the AIFS, the arbitration interframe space, and basically it's the queue with the shortest AIFS which is going to win. In this case, of course, voice would have the shortest arbitration interframe space. It would win, it would transmit the data first, and then the video would basically in effect have to back off. The contention window would be reset. The contention window would actually take on a new value, and this value would be incorporated by using the persistence factor. So we would take the current contention window, multiply it by the persistence factor to give us a new window size. This would hopefully alleviate the potential problem of windows counting down at the same point to 0 multiple times. Of course, each stream can have its own AIFS to help arbitrate, and each stream, of course, naturally is going to have its own contention window. The lower the priority, the larger the value of the contention window. Let's take a look at some of these timers in a little bit more detail. Looking at the left-hand side of the diagram, we have the diffs, or the distributed interframe space, and the arbitration interframe space. Basically, the arbitration interframe space can be greater or equal to the diffs. It can't actually be smaller. Moving to the top of the diagram, you can see I've got two AIFSs indicated, two arbitration interframe spaces, which could be used for prioritizing, for example, the voice and the video. In this case, AIFS2, having the shorter gap, would actually be used for the voice, and the AIFS1 will be the space used for the video. I'm also showing on the diagram the distributed interframe space, the time required between successive frames to make sure that there's no overlap or interference. Dropping down a little bit further, you can see the PIFs. This is the point interframe space. Now, I haven't really discussed this, but there is another technique for providing QoS within a Wi-Fi network. Basically, I think the simplest way to explain it is you would set up the access point as a time division multiplexer. Each station would be allocated a specific time slot where it could transmit. But this is seldomly used. It's very difficult to coordinate the various access points. So for the purposes of this presentation, I'm actually not going to include any in-depth explanations of how that system works. Below that, we've got the CIFS, or the short interframe space, and this is the shortest space or timer, and this basically defines the time required before you can transmit a request to send, clear to send, or an acknowledgement. It's also the time required at least for a station to transfer from a transmit mode to a receive mode, that is, to convert the radio over from transmitting to receiving. So this is the shortest period of time with regards to any of the timers. So what was 802.11e modeled on in terms of prioritization? Well, it was actually based on 802.1p. 802.1p has been around for many years on the wired side of the network and provided 8 different levels of prioritization. You can see them here: background, best effort, excellent effort, critical applications, video, voice, inter-network control, and network control. Because there are only 4 different mechanisms, or 4 different buckets in 802.11e, these have to be mapped over. So you can see here we've in effect got 4 different levels of prioritization, where we have background, best effort, and excellent effort are merged together, basically into best effort. We have critical applications and video, which would be merged into simply video. Voice, inter-network control, and network control, again, have all been pretty much merged into just voice. And voice has the highest level of prioritization. When we implement quality of service using 802.11e or Wi-Fi multimedia, we don't simply call it anymore distributed channel access, we call it enhanced distributed channel access, or EDCA for short. And here you can see some typical examples of how the contention windows are set for the different types of traffic. So you can see, for example, with voice, the contention window, the minimum value would be 3, the maximum value would be 7. The AIFSN, or the arbitrated interframe space, this would be set to 2, and the maximum transmit opportunity, this is the maximum amount of time that you can hold onto the channel for voice, will be just over 1.5 milliseconds. For video, due to the nature of the video traffic, it's got a lower priority, but it would obviously be transmitting a lot more information. It would actually hold on to the channel for double that period of time at over 3 milliseconds. And then you can see other examples in the table for best effort and background. Within a Wi-Fi network, the access point also plays a very key role in helping set up the overall quality of service. One important function is the QoS Enhanced Basic Service Set. The QBSS is sent as part of the beacon or in response to a probe. The access point can tell the station, for example, the total number of clients which are currently associated, the channel utilization, the percentage of time the access point has sensed that the channel is busy, and the available admission capacity, the capacity available for a new client when associated. If that particular access point is too busy, too heavily loaded, then the station may have the possibility, for example, of associating with another access point which can guarantee a higher quality of service. Thank you for watching this Alan Talks Tech video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to get more information on my technology videos with additional material, you can visit my wiki at alantestwiki.pbworks.com. Once again, thanks for viewing.